Hi, this is Jose Palomino with another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And today's guest is Meny Hoffman of Ptex Group. And Meny is many things. He does things in the area of marketing and business growth, works with a lot of different type of companies all over the world. But today we're going to focus on something that he helps a lot of leaders with, which is leadership, effective leadership, especially for growing companies. So listen closely as we learn some key principles that you can apply right after listening to improve your leadership and therefore improve the performance of your organization. So let's welcome Manny to the show right now. Well, welcome Manny to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, Manny, you are a man of many talents, and from seeing you in various networks that we're in together, I know you have an impact on a lot of different people from different angles. But how would you say is your primary focus or your main audience, so our listeners can get a sense of who you are?
So we help growing businesses flourish, which means business owners that have a proof of concept, they know what they're doing, and they need to get to the next level. Our agency does that from a creative perspective, from positioning, branding, marketing, web development, and so on. And outside of that, I do it a lot with education as well to help companies get to the next level.
Wow. So that whole next level theme, again, I mean, who doesn't want to get to the next level? But there's a challenge there, especially for growing businesses. And you talk about growing businesses, right? So business that started out with, it's myself and a partner, and then we hired one person. All of a sudden, I have 30 people working with me. And usually, and I hear this from working with business owners, the frustration that not everybody's on the same page, and why isn't everybody on the same page? And that's usually a leadership challenge of some sort, right? So could you just expand on what you've seen maybe as some things that people do well in transitioning through growth from a leadership point of view?
Great question. So something that I've shared so many times when I speak to leaders, which is we're living in an economy and in a world that's very easy to grow a company. However, managing the growth is the hard part. And what I try to say with that is when you have somebody that maybe was working for someone else and they decide they want to go on their own, the first book of business will be getting from friends and family, from the network. But they'll be the salesperson, they'll be the person delivering the service, they'll be the bookkeeper, they'll do everything. And they are probably the best at it in the beginning because they know they have that vision, what they want to do. As soon as they have to hire in the first person, the second person, which means now they're starting to set a foundation for growth. And they've never learned that. They've never set themselves up for that. And that's why the statistics are between 80-90% fail within the first 5 years, not because there's not a need for the service or product, not because those people are not interested in building businesses, they're not positioning themselves for scale, which means they're growing their company, but not managing the growth. So I would say the first most important thing for a leader when they start getting into that stage is clarity. Nothing is as important as clarity is where do you want to go? What's the destination? And what do you want for the company? And now, one more important and one other part of the clarity is casting that clarity to the team. Because you could have clarity, and if you're not casting it to the team, it's actually worse for your team members. But if you have the clarity, you have that vision, and you're able to cast it to your team, now you have a bunch of people work together for the same mission, for the same vision. And ultimately, now you go into accountability, building out your org chart, who is doing what, and so on and so forth. That's managing for growth, managing for scale.
Well, it's interesting, Manny, because one thing I've had this conversation many times with many different owners over the years, where they have this sense of frustration because they have that clarity in their head. They know where they want to go, but they haven't done a good job of communicating it. And usually they test that by asking their team, do you think I communicate vision well? What are people going to say? Of course, yes, boss, you're the best at communicating vision. So they're stuck in this place where the team doesn't even know. It's a paycheck. And then the owner gets very frustrated that why aren't people driven the way I'm driven? I didn't need anyone to tell me what to do. I just did it. And I would tell them, I said, but you're like the owner. Like, of course, I mean, you have full rights and privileges over whatever you do here. So how have you navigated that conversation with somebody where the number one problem maybe isn't even a lack of clarity, it's like lack of self-awareness of how they are in their organization? I mean, isn't that one of the first things you have to do is like, dude, you got to get your act together in terms of being a leader? I mean, I'm just curious how you've managed
Sure.
that conversation.
So this is a great question because a lot of leaders struggle, especially smaller companies that have not positioned themselves for casting vision and doing this for multiple years. What I would say practical on that note is that there's two parts. The responsibility of a leader is to lead, which is casting that vision, which means is you do something that nobody else in the organization will do. Nobody thinks 5 years ahead, 3 years ahead, because it's your baby, your company. You need to know where you want to go. However, bring in your people on how we're going to be getting there. Bring them in. So maybe they're seeing what you're seeing, but maybe they believe it or don't. They think it's a dream, whatever it is. But if you, in the how, which is going to be a little bit more in the now, in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, this is the stuff we want to start doing because of that longer vision. That's when you get them excited and show them what's in it for them. If we could achieve this, then this is what you could get. It's the role in the company. It's the satisfaction. It's the autonomy of you have built this together. It's an incentive. It's bonus structures, whatever it is. Whatever works for your team, but show them what's in it for them. But the point that I'm trying to do is bring them into the how, because otherwise you become a dictator. Let's do this, or let's go there, and you guys also rally around me and do it. No, let me bring you in discussing how can we get there? What's your opinion? What's Tom's opinion? What's Sally's opinion, and so on and so forth. And then together you create that directional roadmap for your company.
Well, I love the phrasing there, Manny, which is bring them into the how. Because I think sometimes as an owner, you kind of know what you would do, and you assume they know but they don't even know if they're allowed to do it, you know. And I've seen organizations even, you know, cranking along at $5-10 million. And I'm a big believer that owner-led businesses have to watch cash, but where people aren't empowered to like even take a customer to lunch without the owner stepping in and speaking into it. It's like, okay, at some point, there's got to be some sort of delegation, right? So what are some things that if somebody listening to this saying, well, maybe I'm this owner they're talking about, right? They might feel a little pang of something right now, of recognition. Maybe it's me. What are some first steps somebody can take? Because I don't think you're suggesting like, hey, here's the steering wheel, everybody, you can do whatever you want. It's not that. But how do you start delegating? How, if you haven't done it so far, if you've always been the hub and spoke and you've been running things tightly all along, how do you start giving away some authority to get more done?
Sure. So first of all, the art of delegation is the stepping stone for every successful leader for years, years and decades. If you look in the history, because if you want to do a few things, then do it yourself. If you want to do big, you want to achieve big things in your life, you got to be able to surround yourself with great people, which ultimately you have to start delegating. Now, there's an art to delegation. We could link it up in the show notes. There is a guide that I put out there for free, which is just going through the steps of how to achieve it. And most times when people fail in delegation is because they move too quickly in trust. So they hire this new assistant or they hire this new employee, and all of a sudden they're giving them, the password to the bank account. Wait a minute, there's a couple of steps till you earn that. Okay. That's one thing. So trust and verify. So that's the process. Till at one point you say, this person thinks like me, does like me. I could trust them with those decisions. Now,
and just let me pause you 1 second there, because what I've seen in that scenario is sometimes if an owner has been in pain, suffering through something that's not working, and they find that person says, I can solve that. That's when I've seen that take place, where they say, okay, here are the keys, fix it for me. And then a year later, they're firing that person, telling the next person, they basically robbed me for, they didn't do the job right.
Correct.
And because they didn't actually delegate, they abdicated there.
2%. So there's a process, and if you learn it the proper way, and you could literally go by every time you hire a new employee to go about that, it's amazing. And not every employee needs to be in that stage. You have people that need to get to the level of delegation that you should have that trust. But you need to surround yourself with some of those employees so you could give over a project and feel comfortable with that. However, even if that's the case, as a leader, you always have to inspect what you expect. Which means is what are you putting in? What are the benchmarks? What are the what are the different mediums you're putting in your schedule where you're going to be able to inspect what you expect? Yeah, you're not going to, you're not giving over your business and going on vacation for 6 months and then thinking everything will be amazingly well and you're not needed. Yeah, some people arrive to that destination, but the everyday business owner has responsibilities. However, you're delegating projects. The question is, what are you putting in place, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, where you have that inspect what you expect? So you just don't take away the autonomy, just ask them, where are you with this project? Any questions, anything you have to run by me? How did you handle it? Perfect. Or I need to give you feedback, let me give you feedback and then move the project along. So that's something important. So not just giving over the project and just ignoring it or forgetting about it. You got to have those moments where you inspect what you expect. Now, going back to something that you mentioned before, I think it's a very important point, is you ask, how does a leader know what to start? Where do they start if they communicating properly or not? Something that's very valuable and very underused is old-fashioned conversations with your employees. We live in a world, text messages and emails and everything else and Zoom calls and everything else is fine. But once in a while, just get in a room or one-on-one conversation and say, you know what? I'm preparing myself. I want to grow the next 12 months. I want to be a better leader. Where are the areas you could benefit from me being a better leader? And all of a sudden, if that person will be honest, they'll start giving you some feedback. And if you're not knocking down that feedback, they'll continue to give you feedback as you improve as well as a leader. And don't discount that, because the best feedback you can get from the people on the ground that actually are led by you. And that feedback is better than any book, any podcast, and anything else, because you could literally see how you improve based on the feedback, and you continue to improve and ultimately become a better leader.
But now the key to that, Manny, I'm sure you'd agree, is if you ask the question, you have to be willing to listen to the answer.
Oh, yeah. And don't knock down that feedback, even if you disagree, because
right.
Then what you're doing is you're closing that door for any other feedback again.
Right. The next time you ask, they're going to say, oh, yeah, no, everything's fine. Mm-hmm. Why would I bring it up especially, and I've seen this, and I'm sure you have too, where the response is kind of negative, and then the employee feels like they almost feel like they were taken advantage of in that moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You ask me a question you really didn't want the answer to, you'll never get, like you said, you'll never get honest feedback again from that person, and that becomes part of the culture. Mm-hmm. And then eventually everybody knows, just tell the boss whatever they tell you they want to hear from you.
One of the core values in our company is true courage. And basically I infuse, when employees will tell me, when we're looking at a project and maybe it's at 95% done and I've not seen it, and all of a sudden I see it and I give my input, and one of my employees would tell me, in light of true courage, we had a strategy, we ran it by the client, he's happy and everything, like, hold on, that's the biggest blessing that I could hear from an employee. And I say, you know what, you're right. And I walk right past that. And the important lesson is discipline, because as a leader, it's a slippery slope, and employees want to impress. And if they see that they impress with feedback, they'll do it that way, and you'll learn from those feedback. If they see that they're impressed by just being a yes man and everything you do, oh, it's beautiful, then that's what they're going to do. That's going to deliver you every single day. And you don't want that, because that's the worst thing an organization has, if everybody's just saying yes to everything and nobody's questioning the status quo.
Yeah, if I'm flying the plane into the ground, I don't want my co-pilot to tell me everything's blue skies ahead. I want them to point it out. You might want to pull up on that stick there and make a correction. Hey, pardon the interruption. It'll just be a beat. We want to tell you about something that's really exciting, and it might be very exciting to you if you're the owner, CEO, leader of a B2B company, roughly with $2 to $20 million in revenue, and you feel a little bit stuck. You know what I mean? Sales are a little flat, maybe even declining, challenged. Margins are being squeezed. Sales cycles seem to be lengthening, and lead flow is uncertain. We've designed a program based on over a dozen years of us doing exactly this for many B2B companies. It's called the Competitive Edge Program, and you can learn more about it at valueprop.com /edge. Tells you all about the program. It's a 90-day program, really focused on helping you sharpen your value proposition, aligning your value delivery, making sure your marketing program is doing what it has to do if you're in B2B, which is generate opportunities, and make sure your sales process is tight so that you can convert those opportunities into sales. So with that note, let's get back to an exciting episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. You know, when we talk about growing an organization and you describe modeling maybe from the top position, certain behaviors, what happens if you, and this happens too, where I have somebody that I've trusted and delegated leadership to, but they're not really following the same kind of cultural norms that I like to follow, the way I want leaders to be. Maybe they're a little harsh with their employees, or I see them maybe, and you know, where somebody says, okay, no, change it here, change it, you know, sit down, I'll do it for you. You know, that kind of thing where they're not really letting people grow. How much should a leader think about, I'm going to rehabilitate this person, or how much is it they cross the red line and I should actually just be looking at changing out that person because they're hardwired a certain way?
Great question. Obviously, there's the depending on the details and how important that person is to the organization. What I will say is, first, two things. One is culture is led from the top, which means is you as a leader have to set the tone and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable in your culture. And based on that, you have to hire and fire based on your ethos, your core values, and how you want the operation to be. So let's say in a case of, you know, working with respect or attention to detail or whatever it is, if that line is crossed, that person should feel that you don't fit the culture that we have. And that's something that should be concerning for their employee to want to stay or the leader to tolerate. However, as a leader, you have to ask yourself, did I spend enough time to coach that person towards where I want them to be? Or the why behind that core value, why we decided that this is the core value, why we want to be this type of organization. So a lot of times the leaders are so busy and we're not giving the proper attention to it only when it becomes a huge issue. And at that time, the only option we're left is with firing. And sometimes that person could be a very talented individual. With a little bit of coaching, they would be, you know, they would accelerate to be a phenomenal employee, but now everything is lost because of that.
Okay, so that's interesting because especially now we're in the middle of you know, this talent deficit for a lot of organizations. They can't hire the people they want to hire. And I realize that's you know, at the higher ranks maybe not as much, but still finding good people is hard. So I love what you're saying there, Manny, that it really is you as if you are the owner operator, you're the CEO, you set the tone. And the way you framed it, if I heard you correctly, is you frame it objectively, not what I like. I'm the boss and this is what I like. This is what we've agreed to. These are our standards. So let's match all of ourselves, including me as the number one person in my organization, against those standards. So it's not personal. In a sense, it's not me picking on somebody. It's like, no, these are our standards. We said we have open communications. We have true courage, as you pointed out, those things. And if I see somebody has a deficit in those areas, I can point out to the standard and not to my own personal preference.
That's how we operate. It's not how I operate. It's how we operate. And and if you are able to illustrate why it's to everybody's benefit. So when you speak to this individual employee, you're saying, look, the reason why we have this as a core value, because this gives all of us, better communication. Therefore, we could speak freely, or our clients are being serviced better, whatever it is. So it's not about dictated core values. It's something that we saw as a common denominator that will set us apart as a company to work together. And all of us should be very proud of this is the type of company I want to work for. Speaking about, you know, we speak, you know, it's the common, you just mentioned it about, you know, the resignation. It's a worldwide resignation of employees leaving companies. The companies will continue to win in the next decade will be the companies that are outside of paychecks are providing that culture. That person should say, I have something to look forward to come to work. So I could decide to do freelance from my basement or from my home office, or I want to work for this organization because these are the things that that culture gives me. My personal growth, my collaboration, my skill set gets enhanced. And those are the things that will win. Nothing else will be able to get people to take a job versus having the freedom of working from home or whatever it is outside of a great, great culture.
Right. It has to, so it's beyond the paycheck. The world has learned, a lot of people have learned they can replace the paycheck.
Very easily.
Yeah, without the headache. Right. So I talked to somebody recently, he says, people don't quit jobs. Like if you're a computer programmer, you still want to be a computer programmer. Or if you're a technician, you still want to be a technician. You quit bosses. That's a great line, by the way. You quit bosses. And I said, wow, that's pretty profound, but probably very true in a liquid market where there's a lot of opportunities for people to do something else. They don't have to settle for the boss. That's great. So Meny, just as we're coming close to the end of our time here, if somebody listening is, owner operator of a company, they have payroll, they have infrastructure, they have all those daily concerns. What's one or two things, if they said, I'm listening to this, I want to be a better leader. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I want to be a better leader. What are one or two things they can start incorporating that would help them be a better leader? I just want to start with that. And then I have one other question to ask you.
Sure. So I'll just start that answering the question with a quote. Dave Ramsey constantly says that a organization will never outgrow its leader. So the first thing a leader could do is become a better leader by learning, knowing that there is always room for improvement. And what I would say is take every quarter one item on your list. Sometimes it might be communication, might be the way you do and delegate, whatever it is. Figure out something this quarter, I'm going to be working on this, and then figure out a plan how you're going to be better at it. So it might be speaking to some of your key employees that you're comfortable enough to get feedback, and then tell them, look, I'm going to be working on this. I'm going to check in with you in a week from now, in 2 weeks from now. I want your honest feedback if you see improvement. Sometimes you want to listen to, to some podcast or reading some good books on that topic, whatever it is. Every leader should always have something that they're working towards on the personal growth level, because that's going to make you a better leader. So that would be the piece of advice I would give, and never to discount the feedback that you get from your employees and bring them into some of those conversations.
Wow, that's fantastic insight, and I love the idea of that quote you used from Dave Ramsey. You can't, organization's not going to outgrow you. You're setting the pace. That's what leadership means. So I love that. And Manny, this has been a fantastic conversation, very helpful, I think, for anybody listening who's in a leadership role or wants to be in one. If somebody listening to this said, gee, I'd like to learn more about Manny, what he does, how he helps people and so on, where should they go to learn more about you or to contact you?
Sure. So our company, our agency website is ptexgroup.com. That's PTEXGROUP.com. You learn a ton of information, our blogs and everything else that we have over there. Me personally, I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's Meny with an E, so MENYHOFFMAN. I post daily stuff. Just today, I posted about personal goals for the year, not only business goals, how do you divide the two? And it's very practical. A lot of the information I share is not related to what I do as a profession, but I just love helping people. So as much as information that you could consume from me, as I'm going to be happy to give you more.
Wow. Well, Manny, you have given us a lot today, so it's been very much appreciated. Thank you so much for being part of the Revenue Throughput podcast today.
My pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Revenue Throughput podcast. If you like this episode and if you like the series, make sure you subscribe below. And also, if you liked it, please do review it. When people are looking for something exciting to listen to, especially the kind of content we're bringing, which is practical insights for B2B companies, this is a place and a free resource that they can take advantage of. Let them know about it with your review. So subscribe, review, enjoy. Thanks again.